The treatment will cost more than 100 with less than a 10% chance of recovery. That's what the doctor said calmly. My family didn't cry. They didn't argue. They just looked at each other and left. My mother's words were final. Let the old man go. He's lived long enough. We're not throwing money into a black hole. And like that, they were gone. Out the door. Out of our lives. I was 17, broke, angry, terrified. But I stayed. I emptied my college savings. I signed repayment forms. I took a job cleaning floors at the same hospital because he wasn't just an old man. He was my grandfather. And I refused to let him die alone. What they didn't know is why she'd live another 7 years. And I'd become everything they said I couldn't be. When he died peacefully at 91, they came back. Not for him, but for what he left behind. The hallway was too quiet. I could still hear the echo of their footsteps long after the elevator doors had closed. I stood there alone, clutching Grandpa's medical chart in one hand and my half-empty wallet in the other. My mother had been the last to leave. She didn't even look at me. Just tossed a cold glance over her shoulder and said, "You can stay if you want, but don't come asking us for anything later." Then she was gone. The nurse beside me shifted uncomfortably. "Are you Caroline?" I nodded, my throat tight. "We'll need someone to sign the financial responsibility forms. The insurance only covers about 30% of his care. Without intervention, he won't make it through the week." I didn't hesitate. Not because I wasn't scared. God, I was terrified. But because I couldn't bear the thought of him waking up in pain and realizing no one had stayed, I signed every form they handed me. The stack felt like a legal execution. I handed over my college savings, 11,200 scraped together from scholarships and summer jobs. Then I called the HR office downstairs and begged for a job, any job. By 6 p.m., I was scrubbing floors in the pediatric wing. By 1,000 p.m., I was back at Grandpa's bedside, holding his hand while machines beeped and buzzed around us. He didn't wake up for 3 days. When he finally did, his voice was weak, his eyes watery. But the first thing he whispered was, "You stayed." I nodded, tears blurring everything. Always. That night, while he drifted back into sleep, I sat beside him and stared out the window. The world outside kept moving. Cars, city lights, people laughing in restaurants. But here in this quiet hospital room, something had broken and rebuilt inside me. They thought they'd left me with a dying man. But what they really left me with was time. Time to listen, time to learn, time to grow into the woman I was never allowed to be around them. They walked away. I walked forward. The doctors didn't expect him to last more than a week. But a week passed, then 2, then 3. It started with small sign sheets, fingers twitching, a flutter of his eyelids, the way his hand gripped mine just a little tighter during the night. I read to him every evening. At first, I didn't know if he could even hear me, but I kept going. Old war novels, Reader's Digest articles, even IKEA manuals, anything just to fill the room with something human. Then, one afternoon, as I was spoon-feeding him broth, he said, "Too salty." I froze. "Grandpa." He blinked, looked at me, then smiled. "You've always been terrible at seasoning." I laughed through tears. It was the most beautiful complaint I'd ever heard. Over the next few weeks, his recovery picked up speed, not miraculous, but steady. He started sitting up, then speaking longer, then walking again slowly with my arm supporting his. The doctors called it a statistical anomaly. I called it proof that love matters more than odds. We moved into a tiny 2-room apartment across the street from the hospital. It wasn't much. The paint was chipped, the heater rattled, and we had to share one bathroom with 2 other tenants. But we were together. During the day, I worked hospital shifts and took GED classes online. At night, Grandpa taught Mano just math or science, but how to fix things. Circuit boards, light switches, coffee machines. Most people throw stuff out when it breaks, he told me once, handing me a soldering iron. But if you understand how something works, you can rebuild it. That goes for machines, and it goes for people too. Those lessons in that tiny kitchen with a flickering overhead light changed my life. They weren't just about wiring or tools. They were about self-worth, about choosing to repair rather than abandon. One evening, he watched me replace a broken switch in our microwave. He nodded approvingly and said, "You've got the mind of an engineer." I shook my head. I've got the mind of a janitor who doesn't want to burn soup. But secretly, I let that compliment burrow deep inside me. It was the first time anyone had ever believed I could be more than what I was born into. He wasn't supposed to live, but he did. And because he did, I started to live, too. The silence from my family became permanent. At first, I thought maybe they just needed time. That once Grandpa was out of the hospital, they'd come around. But then the bank account my mother used to help me manage closed. The family phone plan I was on disconnected. And the last message I ever got from her said, "You made your choice. Don't expect anything from us ever again." No explanation, no conversation, just erased. I cried for days. Not just because it hurt, but because I knew they didn't even miss me. Not really. Grandpa saw it in my face even when I tried to smile. He never spoke badly of them. He just said, "Some people only know how to love when it's easy. You're not one of those people." Money got tight fast. I was working double shifts cleaning the hospital at night and assisting at a supply desk during the day. I studied for my high school equivalency exams between mopping floors and folding scrubs. I skipped meals sometimes so Grandpa could have a better one. He hated that. So he made me a deal. He'd teach me everything he knew. Mechanics, basic programming, blueprint reading if I promised to charge people for the work. By month 3, we had a shoebox full of cash labeled repair fund. By month 6, the neighbors were knocking, asking for help fixing appliances, rewiring lamps, even building backyard irrigation timers. We never advertised, but word spread. Caroline and her grandpa, they don't just fix things, they care. One night while patching up an old toaster someone dropped off, Grandpa said, "You don't need their name to build your own." I looked at him. Whose name? He didn't answer, just kept twisting the wires into place. That was the night I realized. He knew exactly what he was preparing me for. Not revenge, not payback, but independence. A life beyond anyone else's permission. That year, I earned my GED. The following summer, I was accepted into a part-time tech program for women in STEM. I almost didn't apply. I didn't think I belonged. But Grandpa said, the people who belong aren't the ones born into rooms. They're the ones who build doors. So, I built mine and I walked through it. 7 years. That's how long it's been since they walked away. 7 years since I signed hospital forms with shaking hands and a college fund I no longer had. 7 years since I became the girl who stayed. And in those 7 years, I became something more. I became Caroline Green. Not just the girl with a soldering iron and a mop, but a builder of systems. A fixer of what others threw away. A woman with a name that meant something beyond the family that abandoned her. It started in our garage. Grandpa and I built a prototype for an emergency fall sensor. Something simple, wearable, affordable. We tested it for months. Grandpa even fake fell around the kitchen just to help. We pitched the design to a local clinic. They loved it. Soon, we had our first tiny grant, then a second, then a small team of 2 interns who believed in the idea enough to work for coffee and hope. We named the project Safip. By year 5, we were registered as an LLC. By year 6, we had contracts with 3 elder care facilities in the state. And by year 7, our devices were protecting over 10 senior citizens. Grandpa became our advisor, our mascot, our favorite test subject. But more than anything, he was my anchor. Every decision, every late night, every design sketch taped to the wall. And he was there. He didn't always say much, but when he did, it mattered. Success means nothing if it makes you forget who you are. The local paper ran a story on us one winter. From hospital janitor to CEO, the woman who built her future from a broken past. I didn't send it to my mother. I didn't need to. The story made its way around town, around extended family, around everyone who once said I was wasting my life on a man already dying. I didn't gloat. I didn't call. I didn't respond to the cousin who emailed, "Hey, long time have you been?" Because I knew something they didn't. My name didn't come from them. It came from every night I didn't quit. From every screw I turned, every bill I scraped to pay, Every word Grandpa whispered when I didn't think I could do it. He was 91 when his health began to fail again. Slower this time, gentler. He still drank his morning coffee, still gave me feedback on my code, still smiled when I walked into the room, but we both knew this time he wasn't going to recover. And for the first time in years, I was the one who didn't want to let go. He passed away on a Tuesday morning. The light outside was soft, like the world already knew it needed to be gentle. I found him in his chair by the window, the one he always called his thinking spot, a closed book in his lap, a half-drunk cup of tea by his side, and a faint smile still resting on his face. No machines, no chaos, just peace. I held his hand for a long time before I could even call the hospice nurse. Not because I didn't know what to do, but because I wasn't ready to live in a world without his voice. The funeral was small, just like he wanted. No flowers, no grand speeches, just neighbors, a few colleagues from our early safe step days, and the nurse who once said he was the kindest patient she'd ever met. I was standing at the edge of the churchyard thanking people as they left. When I heard the sound of heels on gravel, expensive ones, I turned and froze. There they were. My mother, my uncle, and his wife, my cousin in a sleek black suit like he was walking into a stockholder meeting. They looked around like they were tourists at someone else's grief. My mother opened her arms as if the past 7 years hadn't happened. "Caroline, sweetheart, you've grown into such a woman." I didn't move. Didn't speak. She tried again. "I know things got messy back then, but we're still family. And your grandfather, he would have wanted us to be together for this." I wanted to laugh, to scream, to ask if she remembered leaving me in that hallway like a used tissue, but I didn't. I just nodded toward the chapel. "He's inside. You have 5 minutes." After the service, as I was gathering programs and quietly folding the donation slips for our new elder care grant, she came up beside me again. This time with that tight smile I remembered from every passive-aggressive birthday dinner. "So about the estate," she said lightly. "We assume there's a will. Your grandfather wasn't careless." I met her eyes flat, emotionless. "There is," I said. Her smile widened like a net. "Wonderful. We'll need to discuss how everything will be divided." That was when I finally spoke. Really spoke. "You left him to die in a hospital bed, Mom. You didn't visit for 7 years. You never called. You never once asked if he made it. You only showed up now because you think he was worth something." She blinked. Just once, but it was enough. Then she snapped. "Don't be dramatic. You're still his granddaughter, but we're his children. He wouldn't cut us out." I looked down at the wooden envelope in my hand as will, sealed, notarized, and already in the care of his lawyer. "You'll find out tomorrow," I said quietly. But just know he wasn't nearly as forgiving as I am. The next morning, I arrived at the law office 15 minutes early. Not because I was nervous, but because I had been preparing for this moment for 7 years. Mr. Alton, my grandfather's attorney, greeted me with the same soft professionalism he always had. He had known Grandpa since the Cefip prototype days. He'd helped us file the LLC paperwork, and now he'd helped close the chapter. The conference room smelled of polished wood and old paper. I took a seat at the end of the long table. In front of me sat a sealed envelope and a small wooden box, the one Grandpa had asked me to keep unopened until this very meeting. Minutes later, the rest of them arrived. My mother walked in like she owned the place in heels too sharp for her words. My uncle followed, face already tight with expectation. My cousin sat across from me, smirking like he was already spending the inheritance. No one said hello. Mr. Alton cleared his throat and began. "This is the last will and testament of Walter H. Green, dated, notarized, and confirmed on his 90th birthday." He paused, then looked at me. "Miss Caroline, would you please open the box now?" I nodded and lifted the lid. Inside was my grandfather's pocket watch, the one he used to wind every morning at 7:00 a.m. Tucked beneath it was a flash drive and a folded note. I slid the drive toward Mr. Alton. He plugged it into a small monitor. The screen lit up with Grandpa's weathered face. His voice filled the room soft and steady. "If you're hearing this, I've already left this world. And if the people I think are in this room are actually here, well, I'm not surprised. My mother shifted uncomfortably. My cousin looked at the ceiling. Let me make this simple, Grandpa continued. I, Walter Green, leave the entirety of my estate, including SAFEP shares, real estate assets, personal accounts, and intellectual property to my granddaughter, Caroline Green. Everything. My uncle's jaw dropped. My mother leaned forward, furious. This isn't legal. He must have been manipulated. She was with him every day. Who knows what she told him to turn him against us? Mr. Alton held up a notarized form. Mr. Green completed a cognitive evaluation 2 weeks before this recording. Full mental capacity confirmed. No coercion, no revision needed. My cousin stood up. You've got to be kidding. She was a janitor. She lived off him. Grandpa's video continued as if he'd heard every word. To those who say she took from me, I say she gave me 7 more years. She gave me mornings with sunlight and coffee. She gave me meaning. You gave me silence. You left me to die because I was inconvenient. She stayed and built something. Not just a company, a life. My mother's face palled. I stayed silent. Mr. Alton folded the will with clinical precision. There are no alternate beneficiaries. No contest clauses included. Any legal challenge will void your right to inherit anything. Walter Green's wishes are absolute. Caroline Green is the sole heir. No one said a word. Not really. There was only the quiet hum of air conditioning and the sound of a legacy being taken away from those who thought they were entitled to it. As they left one by one, my mother looked at me for the first time with something that almost resembled fear. But I didn't flinch because now she knew I wasn't the girl they abandoned. I was the woman he chose. They didn't leave quietly. The moment the law office doors closed behind us, my mother spun toward me, voice low and venomous. You think this makes you better than us? You manipulated an old man on his deathbed and tricked him into signing everything over. I stared at her, this woman who once told me I was wasting my life on a man who wouldn't make it through the night. Now she stood inches from me, furious, not because she'd lost a father, but because she'd lost the money he left behind. You left him, I said calmly. You left both of us. And for 7 years, you never once called to ask if he'd even survived. My uncle stepped in, his voice forceful. We're his children, Caroline. You don't get to erase that. I turned to him. And what exactly did that title mean to you? A duty, a bond, or just a birthright you thought guaranteed a payday? He clenched his fists like words weren't cutting deep enough. We can challenge the will. My cousin snapped. Well, go public. We'll tell the press you manipulated a dying man with dementia. I smiled, not because I was amused, but because I was ready. Go ahead, I said, and I'll release the full unedited footage of Grandpa's testimony, his medical evaluations, his daily journals. I'll publish his handwritten letters about what each of you died or didn't do when he needed you most. Let the world see the kind of family you really were. They were silent. But I wasn't finished. I reached into my bag and pulled out one last envelope. This, I said, handing it to my mother, was written by him a month before he passed. It's not legal. It's personal. She hesitated, then opened it. 3 words handwritten in Grandpa's sharp, steady script. You walked away. Her hands trembled. She crushed the note in her palm like paper could erase shame. For the first time, she didn't speak, not a curse, not a plea, just silence. And that silence said everything. I turned to leave, but paused at the door. You lost the inheritance, I said without turning back. But worse than that, you lost him. And the truth is, you lost him long before he died. I didn't take anything from you. You gave it all up the day you chose convenience over love. They watched me walk out into the sunlight. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small beneath their gaze. I felt whole. Not because I had one, but because I had survived, because I had stayed. Because I had built something beautiful from the ashes they left behind. And because in the end he chose me not just with his will, but with his time, his trust, and the quiet, unwavering love of a man who saw value in the very person they once abandoned. 6 months later, the house was quieter than ever, but not lonely. I kept the kettle he loved, the chair by the window, and the pocket watch, which I still wound at 7:00 a.m. each morning like a ritual, like a promise. But what I did next wasn't about mourning. It was about building. I used a portion of the inheritance to launch the Green Foundation, named not just for Grandpa's surname, but for the man who grew hope out of neglect. The mission was simple: to provide technical training and emotional support to teens and elderly individuals who had been abandoned just like we had been. We started small: 3 laptops, 2 folding tables, and a rented room in a community center. But the day our first student built her own basic fall detection device and shouted, "It actually works," I felt something click in my chest. That joy, that spark. That was him living on. A year later, we opened our first permanent workshop space. 5 years after that, one of our scholarship recipients became a lead developer at Safip. And when she invited me to her graduation, she said, "I never had a real family, but your foundation made me feel like I mattered." I gave her Grandpa's favorite wrench, the one he always said fixed more than circuits. "You do matter," I told her. "And don't ever let anyone make you forget that." I still live in the same house. The company is bigger now, but my life is still simple: no lavish mansions, no flashy cars, just purpose and peace. Because I know what wealth really is. It's the extra 7 years I got with him. It's the lives I've helped repair. It's the girl I used to be and the woman I became because I stayed when no one else would. Sometimes I think about the day they left us at the hospital, about how broken I felt. And then I look at what came from that moment. Not bitterness, but belonging. Not revenge, but restoration. Not inheritance, but legacy. Tonight, I'll wind the pocket watch again. And one day, when I know someone else is ready, I'll pass it on. Not because it's valuable, but because it carries everything that matters. And I'll say what he once told me: "You stayed. You built. And now it's yours."